All right. We have our minutes recorder here. That's wonderful. All right, we will just get started. I think we're going to just go down the agenda. So that means that we won't really introduce ourselves to the third thing. So it feels weird to jump right in with our new member here, but that's what we're going to do. So we'll get there. Agenda and materials review. Are there any changes to the agenda that anybody would like to make? I think one thing is there was talk about what meetings we're going to have coming up. So I'd like to just kind of have that, but that can probably just be at the end in the closing comments. So I don't need to change the agenda for that. And then minutes approval. Are there any changes to make from the June meeting minutes that were sent out?
Are three of us enough to, or four? Is Monique a voting member of our, but not, they did not have the meeting. They weren't at the meeting. So
right.
Is three enough?
I think if you wanted to wait for Bernadette, that would be logical in that particular case.
Right. Bernadette will be here at 5:45-ish. So I think that's fine. I did hear that Jose is not coming and I didn't get any adjustments to the minutes from him. So we can just assume that he doesn't have any. Okay, so next on our agenda is comments from board members and commission liaisons. And this would be a good time to introduce ourselves because we have some new members and returning members who our new members might not know. So I'll start. I am Carolyn Williams and I am the chair of the board right now, which means I get to really gracefully run these meetings, and it's really fun to watch me do that. I'm sure you guys will enjoy that. I don't have any comments. I did go to I do have a comment. I went to the city council meeting and presented our CRB report to them. So that's available on the internet, I imagine, if anybody wants to watch and again, see how fun and awkward I am. But in that presentation, I talked about kind of the cases that we've done or just a brief overview of how the board works. I also took the opportunity, since I had their ear, to encourage them to hire Leah on permanently and also to hire Lindsay and Rob permanently, though that isn't in their power, but I like to take the time to publicly support that as much as I can. And I did that on behalf of myself, not on behalf of the board, because I can't speak for all of you, but for myself, that's how I feel. Hopefully that process is starting soon, the process to make Leah permanent. Lindsay and Rob, do you guys want to introduce yourselves before we go around the board? Or at the end, maybe? Let's do it at the end. I will put our order in the chat, and right now it's me, Clay, and Alan. So that's kind of easy. So Clay, go ahead and give your comments.
I have no additional comments, except I will introduce myself. So I'm Clay Neal. I've been on the board for a little less than a year, but I worked in public safety policy and city government in Portland for a long time before changing careers and becoming an architect. So I currently am an architect in Eugene. I work downtown and don't work in any field related to public safety, but my past hopefully brings some level of knowledge of the issues to the forefront. So it's nice to meet you, Monique and Rick. Welcome to the board.
Hello, Monique and Rick. Nice to meet you. My name's Alan Lyman. I joined the board when Clay joined the board. My background for Eugene would be that I was the city prosecutor of Eugene for about 4 years. I was a Eugene municipal judge for about 6 years till I got chased out. And now I've been a Veneta judge. I have a private practice that has nothing to do with police or criminal law, but I was also a public defender in Miami. So I have a kind of broad perspective. I had a couple of comments and that I just was going to make at a general meeting. The first is I'd like guidance at some point or some advice or discussion as a group about how we look at those open case reports that appear at the end of the auditor's report. Like, how to process that. And, you know, if I heard once, we look at it and if there's something that catches our eye that we want to talk or ask about, but I'd like to engage that at some point. And then the other thing, and it's not for now, but it's something, again, if there's a process, we have new members and we'll be working as a group. And that is like having unfettered total access to the complete investigatory file is a great thing for transparency. And I feel privileged that, you know, that we have it in our city and that we get to look at that stuff. But on the other hand, it's not realistic, I don't think, and I'm just speaking for myself, to redo the entire investigation, which oftentimes with this video, with the body worn video, can invest like hours of a really long time. And there's a risk if things get identified or highlighted, or the meat is at, you know, 1533 on this video, there's a risk of that you get selectively pointed towards things that people want you to see. But you know, we have trust in the auditor, and I'd like to discuss the idea of there being some pointing me to, you know, the incident, the takedown happens at 3317, because otherwise you're really messing with a lot of like driving around in the car and trying to speed, you know, not to miss and stuff. And so I feel, like I said, it's really cool that we have the whole thing, but to be you don't need to do the entire investigation over to see that there's transparency and validity. And I think that's our purpose as a board. And so I'm looking maybe to discuss the idea of some help with the volume of the investigatory materials. And that is my soliloquy for the evening, and thank you. So thanks.
Bernadette, we're just going around and doing our comments for board members and commission liaisons. And you are next, and then we'll do Rick and Monique. They can introduce themselves.
I don't think I have anything to add. Sorry, I was late this evening, but I'm here now.
Do you want to introduce yourself a little bit to our new members?
Oh, sorry. I'm Bernadette Conover. I've been on the board a couple of times. Most recently, the last 2-ish years. And before that, back in about 2009, right about the time that Mark came on as the police auditor. And we had our first community impact case. And I think I've been here for all the community impact cases. I don't think there were any on my off time. I grew up in Portland. I moved to Salem for school and then eventually ended up in Eugene. Is that good enough, Carolyn? Okay, perfect, thanks.
Go ahead, Rick.
Okay, thank you, Carolyn. I'm Rick Rosetta. I'm returning to the board after missing a year or so. I've been practicing law in Eugene for over 49 years. And during my career, I've represented, back when the city of Eugene, state police, and Lane County and Lynn County and Benton County were insured by insurers. I represented the police in false imprisonment, excessive force cases. So I have that perspective to bring. And I've seen a lot of cases. Tried hundreds of cases in circuit and US District Court, been to the Supreme Court. And so I get a pretty good idea of what is going on. But I'm just another member of the community that wants to give some input into this situation, and I'll do my best. I think that it's a hot area to be involved in right now, and I think we're going to be looking at dealing with a lot of new issues, and I'm certainly willing to spend the time to do that. I'm retired for about 1.5 years from practice, and then I couldn't stand it any longer and returned to practice. I'm doing some work on other matters that are totally different than what I did for 40 years. And it's enjoyable because I'm learning new areas of the law. And so I get to see a lot of senior citizens in my work, and that's kind of fun. So that's all I have. I'm happy to be back on the board.
We're happy to have you back. All right, Monique, could you introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm excited to be here. Vicki, I wanted to say thank you for helping me get oriented in this process. And I got to say hi to Lindsay and Rob. I have a little bit of like an introductory statement that I'll go off of. I know Leah isn't here. I look forward to meeting with her at some point. My name is Monique. I'm 20 and I'm a junior at the University of Oregon, majoring in sociology, minoring in legal studies. In high school, I was a part of the Eugene Teen Court, and since last year, I've served on the Bridges Oregon Board of Directors. Bridges is a nonprofit clinic, or it's a nonprofit domestic violence clinic. It specializes in providing services to deaf and blind people throughout the state. So that's been a really fun experience. I've been on the policy committee for the last 6 months, I think. I sought to join you on the CRB because in various aspects of my life, I want to be a part of the work to make my community more safe and more fair. Increasing transparency and accountability so that more people are confident in the process and willing to be engaged is integral to that goal, I think. I never want police work to be hindered because someone was uncomfortable to come forward with helpful information. If we can work to ensure that when something happens or someone feels that something has gone wrong or misconduct has occurred, that we can listen, review the complaint, and come to a fair and sound judgment, marginalized members of our community can feel safe enough to participate in that process. As I said to the mayor and members of the city council, the power in local government to impact people on a personal level is meaningful, and it feels like a bit of a privilege to be part of that effort. I'm really excited to work with you all while also simultaneously learning in a hands-on way. I hope that my involvement in the community and what I've gathered in my studies so far, as well as my lived experience, will bring a valuable contribution to your discussions or to our discussions and our work. And that is it.
Well, nice to meet you. Welcome. I work at the U of O. Come to Tykeson at the Career Center and say hi to me sometime. It's cool. I like to see people of different generations on this board, and that's great. I like that. Okay, so we decided to wait on approving the minutes until you were here, Bernadette. So now we can do that. Do we want to approve the minutes from June? Or make adjustments?
I move that we approve the minutes from June.
Okay.
Then I agree. Raise your hand if you want to approve them. The four of us who were here can do that. We couldn't have done it without you, Bernadette. Thank you for showing up to do that. And that puts us right at almost the right time for public comment, although we have no public unless our minutes reader would like to do them. I shouldn't say that. Did we receive any email or written public comment? Okay.
Let me just double check to see if any's come in the last 5 minutes.
I forgot to let everyone else, the staff, introduce themselves, or I can do that. Leah usually does it. How about you introduce yourselves? And then also Cindy. So Lindsay, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So we're all sitting there waiting for someone else. There aren't any emails, so I don't think we have any other public. So my name's Lindsay Foltz. I was once a CRB member, just like you all. I served with Rick and Carolyn and Bernadette, actually. So it's nice to see you again, Rick. So I started this job in January of this year. I guess my title is the Associate Auditor. We're on limited duration positions until they sort of sort out who the permanent auditor is going to be. That permanent auditor can then choose their staff members. So we're kind of in that funny limbo that Carolyn had referred to. Before this, so I just finished my doctoral degree actually like in May of this year. I have a degree in anthropology. Before this, I also worked for the city in the Human Rights Office and also doing fair housing analysis for community development. So that's just a little bit about me. I like local government. And I like this board. So one of the great things about being a part of this board was that I thought we carried a lot of different perspectives and we weren't afraid to share them, but we were always able to do so in like a collegial manner that I think was really respectful and special, because I don't think that that kind of discourse is common in the age that we live in. So it's something that I really valued from the experience. And it's a pleasure now to then have the opportunity to staff this board. So that's a little bit about me. And I'll turn it over to Rob.
And I started in January on the same day as Lindsay. I'm associate auditor also. We work for Leah. I retired from the federal service after 24 years in December. So I'm starting my second career with the city. Pretty simple.
And I know Beatrice and Vicky don't usually talk here, but go ahead. I see you.
Hi, you can't see me, but my name is Vicki Cox and I have Senior Program Coordinator is my fancy title. I have been in the auditor's office since the first auditor. And so I'm kind of the old person here. I do mostly intake and making sure the office runs. So anyway, that's what I do.
Hi, everybody. This is Beatrice. I am the Community Engagement Coordinator and Translation Specialist. Try to say that 5 times. But I am in charge of trying to find outreach opportunities to let the community know about what our office does. And I actually have a little update later on, maybe when we do the auditor report, about an upcoming outreach opportunity. I have been with the auditor's office since August of 2016, so coming up on 6 years. Before that, I am originally from Central Oregon, but I came to study at the U of O. I graduated with Family and Human Services, and then I worked at a local nonprofit that caters to the Latino community, Centro Latino, for a few years, and then I came over to the city. So that's a bit of my background.
I think last is Cindy, if you were there.
Hello, I'm here. Glad to meet all the new folks and welcome Rick back. I am the Professional Standards Manager at the Eugene Police Department. I have been with the city for 27 years and NIA for 21. I lead our team and we have 2 IA sergeants one of them is here tonight. I'll let Sergeant Peckles introduce himself. And then we have also in professional standards, in addition to IA, we have policy analysis and development, and we have a quality assurance analyst as well. And then Rick Weber in our office is our program coordinator, and he sort of like Vicky keeps our office running. He's sort of integral to everything that we do. So again, welcome, and Joel, I'll let you take it away.
Thanks, Cindy. Unfortunately, I had a bad link. I think it sent me to one of the civilian links. So Rob helped me out. So that's why I'm labeled as Rob Eller. So I'm Sergeant Joel Peckles, one of our internal affairs sergeants. I'm one of the newer ones, super new. I just came to internal affairs back in January. I've been with Eugene PD for 16 years and promoted about 3 years ago to sergeant. And up until January, all my time has pretty much been working patrol. And I was one of the first park resource officers also when that program started.
All right, that's everyone. Lindsay or Rob, real Rob, are you able to change the name on that one so it's less confusing?
I don't think so, because he's clicked on my personal link. So I'm not a techie, but no, I don't know of any way to do that. And his link doesn't work. So this was the fastest solution.
I'll see if I can find an earlier
I had it.
email with you. Oh,
Thanks,
there we go.
Liz.
Awesome.
Wow, that was
Figured it
impressive.
out.
The magic of technology. All right, so now we can move on to the training topic, which is the auditor's report. So I'm going to turn it back over to, I assume, Lindsay and Rob.
Sure, let me pull it up and I'll share my screen. Give me 1 second.
Rob, is this the one you're doing or is this the one I'm doing?
Oh, good question. No, this is you. I'm sorry.
It's all right. Just making sure. I had to look at the agenda. Okay, so I will share my screen. Don't want to fight to share screens here. And there. Can everyone see that okay? Okay, I'll just make a slideshow. So for the training topic this month, we decided to just give you the same auditor's report that we gave at City Council. Now that Council has seen the report, it should be, if it's not currently available on our website, it should be soon, or I'd be happy to send it to you. But this is just sort of the Cliff Notes version, so I'm happy to answer any questions that you have about the annual report. Feel free to interrupt me. You'll probably have to like verbally interrupt me so that I notice, because I'm not great at looking at the chat. So as part of the annual report, just so that you like, just as like a background, some of this information is not going to be new to you all, but I figure anytime we're doing these reports is also a chance to potentially educate any public who may be watching about what we are and what we do. And the report is sort of outlined in this fashion. So I'll quickly go over these first few slides. Basically, it just goes over the mission and purview of the auditor's office to provide safe, accessible, impartial intake for all complaints against EPD, so as a centralized intake point, and to ensure accountability, fairness, transparency, and trust in the complaint system. We do intakes, classifications, and we view the investigations and then make recommended adjudications. And we also support and staff the Civilian Review Board that monitors our own work, reviews complaint cases, and provides policy recommendations to Eugene Police Department, particularly through the Police Commission liaison. So this slide is basically just an org chart, but what it shows is that with the little green box is where the police auditor's office sits, and this is to indicate that it's an independent police oversight. We don't sit underneath the police department. We don't report to the city manager. The auditor's office is directly under mayor and city council's direction. So the functions of the office are to, this will look very familiar to you all because these are essentially the things that you discuss when you go over case reviews, right? We take the complaint intakes. The auditor classifies them. Only the auditor can classify the complaints, which determines sort of which path they take in the investigation process. We monitor the investigations, recommend adjudications, recommend policy and training. We report out to the community. We do that a few different ways. And then we also support the Civilian Review Board. So this is kind of the meat of the report. I'm going to move my display a little bit so I can see a bit better. So this is the complaint volume for the year. As you can see in 2021, complaint volume was down slightly from kind of the all-time high 2 years ago at 339 complaints. Of these, 289 complaints were investigated, which means that there were 50 complaints that were dismissed. The most common reason for dismissing complaints as they came in was that they were outside the jurisdiction of the Office of the Police Auditor. They were not timely, the employee was not identifiable, or there was an alternative remedy available, meaning, for example, if you wanted to contest a citation, the appropriate place to do that would be in the courts. When it comes to classifications, there are these 5 categories that the auditor can choose to classify a complaint. As scary as this flow chart looks, it's actually the simplified version. We have modified it to try to make it a little bit more user-friendly, but essentially you can read it from left to right in terms of sort of, I think of it like the severity of the classification. So there are service complaints or policy complaints. And inquiries, those 2 things are typically reviewed by supervisors and then closed. The auditor always reviews those, but it doesn't go through the same type of process that, for example, an allegation of misconduct would go through. There are incident reviews. Inquiries and incident reviews are sort of these in-between places when we're not really sure what we're looking at yet, and we want to learn more, those can be reclassified or can be closed within those inquiry or incident review categories. Incident reviews would be if serious, like a more serious allegation of misconduct has been made, but we want to learn more before continuing the investigation. And inquiry would be more like a service level complaint. Allegations of misconduct are the more serious complaints. They go through the internal affairs investigation. The auditor participates in the interviews and those types of things that are part of those investigations. And then the auditor, after reviewing all the materials, makes a recommended adjudication. Ultimately the chief issues the final adjudication. And then after that, if it's sustained, then there's a disciplinary process and then it's closed. And then there's allegations of criminal conduct. And those follow a slightly different path because there's the district attorney reviews them, but then also often there's kind of a concomitant like misconduct review that goes along with that. So if you look at the classification types, even though in 2021 we had fewer overall complaints, what this chart is trying to get at is to show that the complaints that required more intensive work on the part of the auditor's office and IA were higher than usual. So if you look at these, this like orange category here, the allegations of misconduct, you can see that that was a significant increase from 2020 or really any previous year to 2021, as were the allegations of criminal conduct, which you can see in red at the bottom. So just it's a way to visualize the complexity of the cases that were reviewed in 2021.
Hey, Lindsay, was that, because one place it said something about closed cases, outcomes. So are those only 2021 cases that were made in 2021 or closed in 2021?
Super good question. So 2021 was unusual in that we had a handful of lingering cases that did not get closed within the year. So there are still a few as of the writing of this report that are still open, but this is like all the ones that came in 2021. And you'll see in the disposition section that there are a handful of them that are still open where there is no disposition yet. Does that help? So this is like on the intake side. So this is how anything that was taken in and classified in 2021 is included in this chart. And then in a couple slides, we'll get to dispositions and you'll be able to see what the dispositions of these cases was, including the handful that still are open.
And that, I can't remember, when did we have the several days of riots? Is that 2020 or 2021?
That was in 2020. And so,
oh, okay.
So yeah, those would not be included in these numbers.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Follow that up. Does this not include cases that were from like 2019 that weren't closed until 2021?
No, these are the fresh intakes from 2021. It's I looking in the past few years, I didn't do a deep dive, but the last few years, it's very unusual for there at the time of the annual report writing, because we usually wait until the first quarter is over to kind of catch up. It's very unusual for there to be this many open cases. And I would attribute that to low staffing levels in the auditor's office for the duration of 2021. Typically, by the time the report comes out, that stuff's been mopped up. So here's where we'll get to that question. I'm sorry for the teeny tiny writing. In the report, it's a little bit bigger. So in terms of allegations of misconduct, you can see the chart on the left shows sort of how they were, what types of misconduct was alleged. So you have conduct, unsatisfactory performance, truthfulness, use of force, courtesy, and it goes down. On the right-hand side is the disposition. So you can see the number that were sustained. That second bar that you see are the ones that are still open. So you can see there are a good number of allegations of misconduct that remain open at this time. And then you can see those that were within policy, unfounded, insufficient evidence, dismissed, or someone resigned during the investigation, in which case the investigation stopped.
Lindsay,
Can I ask you-
during-
can I? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Carolyn.
during when we did this for the city council, we talked about how a lot of the conduct, like these aren't single people.
Correct. So any one complaint can generate multiple allegations against one or more officers or employees, I should say. So it could be a single complaint and there's 3 allegations of misconduct against 3 separate officers, which would lead to 9 allegations. So if that is hope, I know that's kind of awkward, but that's sort of how, that's one of the reasons why we separate out, like we have the number of intakes and then the number of allegations is sort of a separate number, because it depends on how many allegations are attributed to that one particular intake. It could be against multiple people, it could be multiple allegations. And then Clay, did you have a question? I heard somebody.
Yes. I was wondering about that chart on the left and what the 2 bars are. So like for conduct, there's 2 bars of green. Same for all of the categories.
Oh, I think it's just a spacing issue because it's an artifact of the spacing. We should all be like, yeah, sorry about that. That
That's
doesn't.
okay. Just I think
Yeah.
we're all reading it correctly, but
Yeah. Yeah, sorry about that. The second bar that you see directly under conduct, it should say open. That's my typographical error. And then the rest of them should be relatively close to the correct bar. Sorry, it was so tiny. And then the other question that came up a little bit in city council, and this is much more clear in the report proper, is that conduct is not just like a general term, it's actually like specific to the policy. There's like a conduct policy. So if you want to know more about what that means, I can get into finer details, or in the report proper, it should be a little bit more clear. So these are the allegations of criminal conduct. So when there are allegations of criminal conduct, there are also often allegations of like policy violations that go along with them. We look at those sort of as a bundled unit. So, and I know this is like, I'm not going to be very good at describing this, so please ask questions. I'll do my best to describe it. But if there's one allegation of criminal conduct and let's say 5 policy violations, we look at all those under this, that whole case will be classified as an allegation of misconduct. So you can see that there are some non-criminal things like expectations of supervisors. That's not like a criminal matter. That would be an allegation of misconduct. It just means within the bundle of things for that case, there was also those policy violation allegations. And in terms of the dispositions, you can see that for 7 of these, the employee resigned or employees resigned during the investigation. There were 5 sustained. There are a good handful that are open, and that there were 4 that were unfounded, 1 that was dismissed as outside the jurisdiction, 1 that was dismissed because the employee was not identifiable, and 1 that was administratively closed. And so this, what I'm trying to do is make it a little bit more clear that, and like Carolyn had mentioned in the beginning, just because it's a lot of allegations, it could be against 1 or more employees. So this one, what I'm trying to do is show you like the number of allegations, the type of discipline, and then the number of employees who received that type of discipline. So we're not allowed to discuss specific discipline against specific employees, but we're allowed to give aggregate trend data, which is what we do in this report each year. So at the bottom, you can see, there were a high number of allegations of misconduct. There was 1 employee terminated. So all of those allegations were tied to the 1 employee who was terminated. So I'm just trying to make it clear that there weren't 40 people terminated. Like that could be really confusing, I think. And so this is my attempt at trying to make that a little bit more transparent. And so you can see that documented counseling was the most frequent type of discipline with 8 employees, day suspension 3 employees, or reprimand 3 employees. The employee resigning prior to corrective action, that was 1 employee. There's coaching, and there was a probationary employee who was let go, and then there's a suspension. So for the administrative outcomes, there was obviously major staffing changes in 2021 with Mark Gissner retiring in February and Leah becoming the interim auditor. The office went through the recruitment and hiring process for Rob and myself, which was a major undertaking. We ended up starting in 2022, but all that process happened in 2021. We supported the Civilian Review Board, and the ad hoc committee on police policy was a major commitment of staff in the auditor's office last year, as well as ongoing community outreach, work on trying to identify a technical solution and vendor for a public portal. What that is an online complaint system that would be more robust than our current system, which would allow people basically to create tickets and truly anonymous complaints, and still be able to log in and see like where their complaint is in the process. Right now, people are allowed to submit fully anonymous complaints, but we don't have then a way to contact them back to do any follow-up. So this would create a technological solution to that problem. So several vendors were identified and considered, and I believe that that contract is in the works to start working on that soon, like anytime. So that's where that is. And then ongoing trainings. For 2022 and 23, Leah can speak more eloquently to these things, but the goals, some of them, you know, are carrying over, but a continued commitment to the accessibility of the complaint system and our process. Leah has identified and received funding to for a staff position to improve diversity, equity, and inclusion, both within our processes and
Equity and inclusion.
and beyond. And
Diversity, equity, and inclusion.
yes. And I think that she wanted to begin that process by doing having an external audit of the
Lindsay, can I interrupt? I don't know that Vicky knows that she's not muted right now.
thank you.
Sorry.
An external audit related to diversity, equity, and inclusion in our process in our office. So I think that's on the docket for 2022 and 23. Our office, we've outgrown our space with the staffing levels that we have now. And so we will be relocating. We're in the process of identifying and signing a contract on a new space. We'll continue to engage in and improve our core competencies in the functions of the auditor's office, be able to expand outreach now that we're getting sort of out of the more shutdown phase of COVID, and we'll continue to try to collaborate and improve on the things that we do collaboratively with EPD, such as deadly force investigations, exploring early intervention system opportunities, and the ongoing work of the ad hoc committee on police policy. And that is all that I have. I don't know, Beatrice, is this a spot that makes sense to you to talk about the outreach, or were you meaning more like the auditor's report at the end of the meeting?
Were we planning to still do an auditor's report at the end? Because
yeah, there's like
okay.
a little tiny one, but
I think I can wait until that moment then. Thank you.
Great. So I'd be happy to answer any questions anyone has.
I do. I have a question. It's probably too late, but I just would chime in that as far as relocation of the office, that one of the incredible features of the auditor's office is its visibility, the ability for someone to walk from the jail. It used to be from EPD, not anymore, but it just, I hope that you're considering storefront and, you know, that it's not in a building and you have to go in an elevator, you know, deterrence for accessibility. So that would be one thing. And then the second thing, when you had the one officer terminated and 35, you know, allegations that result, is that in the 1 year? So that officer, that is in 21, those okay, all right.
Yeah, good question. And thank you for the feedback.
I had a question too, but also I think to be, I don't know, is devil's advocate an appropriate thing to say anymore. The opportunity to anonymously walk into the auditor's office is also something that's important. So I totally see what you're saying, Alan, about having it be visible and accessible, but there's also something to be said for people who don't want to walk into any building that says police on it. And so that's another thing to consider. I think both.
Yeah, I can say when I worked in the Human Rights Office, it wasn't totally out of the ordinary for people to want to have an auditor intake done in our office, so they wouldn't have to be seen walking into the auditor's office downtown. That was a complaint. That was a concern for people, particularly if they wanted to complain against a downtown officer that they were afraid might see them going into the auditor's office. So we would try to find ways to accommodate that, but that was a concern that was occasionally come up.
And then my question, on the discipline slide, it looked like there are only a handful of officers who were disciplined, and that seems strange to me with like 289 investigated allegations that there'd only be 20 officers who received discipline. Is that just because that's the number of cases that were sustained?
Yeah, so not all of them were sustained, right? So that's part of it. And I would definitely encourage you to look like carefully at the full report, because it goes into a lot of details that I'm not going to want to try to go from memory to tell you about. But the other thing is to consider that even if there's, let's say, one officer that receives a certain kind of discipline, you'll notice that usually there's more than one allegation, right? So it could be one officer and 10 allegations or something. So that's worth sort of keeping in mind. But the full report goes into much more detail, looking at sort of line by line what the outcomes of those allegations were. So yeah, it's worth considering. If there's not any other questions, I think we can probably move on.
I will say, just not a question, but a comment. It is very hard for me to absorb and question in the same time frame.
That's totally fine.
If I have questions after today's meeting, what's the best way to ask those?
You're welcome to email, call, send a carrier pigeon, any way. We're totally happy to answer any questions at all. And I'm the same way. And I usually like to read the thing, think about the thing. So please feel free.
Yeah, especially with data, it's like you can read a graph 50 different ways. So
totally.
That's helpful. Thanks, Lindsay.
Clay, you're also welcome to bring it to your comments section next time we meet, if it would be something that would be beneficial to be public. So
Sure. Thanks.
If there are no other questions, let's do a break, 10 minutes. So 6:25, we will return. All right, we will do some service complaints and incident reviews. I know that this is, okay, I want to explain that this is different than our normal cases. Usually we do one case or two cases, or we do one case and one service complaint. For this meeting, we always kind of run through 5 service complaints. And as the auditor report showed, service complaints are a little bit less, they're further to the left on that chart of kind of severity. So these are things where a complaint came in or something happened. So we saw that there was possible misconduct. And then throughout kind of the investigative process, it was deemed that it didn't need to be risen to official misconduct. Is that right? I think I'm explaining this well. So these are cases that are a little bit less intense than normal. And I'm mostly saying this for those of us who are new here. And we do this about one time a year. I think it's cool to see all of these, or to talk about 5 cases for Monique for your first meeting, but then it's also kind of weird that this isn't how most of our meetings go. So just kind of a little background to what we're doing tonight, but it kind of does, it will give you a sense of what our cases can look like. So I'm going to put in the chat again the order, and I started the comment, so we'll start with Clay with the first time, and then we'll kind of go around. And I assume that Rob will be doing the case stuff.
Yes, I'm going to share my screen right now. Just bear with me, having it's sorry, I'm having difficulty here. It's not up there. Can you help me, Lindsay?
Yep, no problem. I'll just put it up and I'll try to pay attention and advance the slides. But if I get distracted, please just say,
I don't.
move forward.
All right, I'm ready. So we actually have 4 incident reviews, and we have 2 service complaints. On the first case, we've got a U-Haul and the facts of the case. So an RP complained that their rights were violated and was racially profiled. So this was classified as an incident review and investigated by an internal affairs sergeant. So and a little details of the case. So Sergeant A conducted a traffic stop on a driver who's also the RP of the U-Haul for speeding. And during the traffic stop, Sergeant A was advised by dispatch that the U-Haul was a stolen vehicle. So after the traffic stop was commenced, Sergeant A removed the RP driver from the U-Haul with a drawn service weapon. Other officers responded. They also had drawn weapons. RP was told by officers that the U-Haul was reported stolen and that they were being detained. So while they were at the traffic stop, a field investigation was completed and officers determined that it was a little bit murky, the renting of the U-Haul, and that there was some unclear contract language, and that this was best resolved as a civil matter. So a U-Haul employee came out and retrieved the U-Haul, and the RP was released. So the internal affairs investigation determined that the complaints for racial profiling were unfounded and that the stop was within policy. And then I'm ready for the next one. Thank you. So then this slide goes over the materials that were included for y'all's reviews. And then I think we're ready for comments.
All right, commenting will go a little bit differently tonight too also. So we'll just have one round per case where we kind of go around and give all of our comments, since we don't really have, there's no adjudication, so we don't have to agree or disagree on that. So it's basically, if you feel like the intake was correct and if you agree with the fact that it was closed without further investigation, that kind of thing. And then other, policy and training things you can talk about if you'd like. One thing that I will say is RP means reporting party. I'm not sure if that was clear. So that's the person who reported this incident to the auditor in this case. And we try very hard to keep all, we try to just be gender neutral pronouns for everybody involved, just basically to protect the identity of everybody. So I think we can probably stop sharing the screen. And Clay, if you want to start with your comments, we'll go just in that order.
Sure.
And even though Rick and Monique, you didn't get to see all of the cases and everything, if you have any comment or question about what happened, I put you in the order, so you will have a chance to talk about each of these.
So reviewing all the information, I don't have a lot of concerns about this case. What I would say is that we talked previously about how race information is recorded before or during stops, and I think a statistic that would be helpful for us and for the community and for the police bureau generally is perceived race prior to a stop and then perceived race after a stop, because one of the aspects of the investigation was sort of assumptions made about whether the officer could have known the race of the driver of the U-Haul before stopping that person. And I think the reasoning in this particular case makes sense, but in some cases there are assumptions made where I don't know that it makes a lot of sense. So to me, this is just an opportunity to think about how are we able to track that a little bit better with actual facts rather than sort of assumptions made through an investigation. But in this particular case, seeing all the evidence and reading all of the investigative reports, I think I don't have a lot of concerns with how it was handled. So that's it.
Well, I would say this is the first, Clay and I, this is the first time that we've been, not speaking for him, but since I've been on the board, I hadn't seen this format or this type of complaint, and I wasn't sure how this meeting was going to go in terms of a review. I have a question for Rob, and that is this IA Pro, the service complaints get routed to a supervisor, a line, not an IA police officer, but a supervisor. And then you said in this particular instance, you said IA concluded that, and this might have been an incident review, but so I'm just expressing that I have some confusion as to, who opined that this was not sustained. That's my question.
So IA Pro is just is a software program that's used to track the programs, and then this incident review was referred to internal affairs who conducted the review of the incident, the complaint, and that was the determination that came down that the officers acted within policy through the internal affairs investigation.
And when it's a service complaint investigated that way, is it a supervisor versus an internal affairs officer, or it depends?
It depends is a good answer, but most of the service complaints go to the field supervisors, which you'll see in case 5 and 6 tonight.
And those are typically sergeants?
Yes.
Okay.
It can be someone else. It could be a lieutenant if it was a service complaint against a sergeant, but generally, yes, the officer who's directly involved in the service complaint, their supervisor is the one who conducts the service complaint investigation, incident review.
Thank you. And then after reviewing the materials in this case and the report, I don't quarrel with it, and I have nothing further to add. Thank you for answering my question.
So this was not a great first service complaint to start with in the packet, in my opinion, because it was so, it's different to review service complaints than it is to review a case file. And trying to figure out where to start this one was pretty challenging. Because for me, it's like looking at a table of contents to be able to understand what's going on. So then I can kind of figure out where I want to go first. Do I want to watch the videos first to make sense of something, or do I need the bigger picture in order to have the videos make sense? So I know that we only do service complaints usually once a year, or sometimes they'll be in with another case. I think if we could come up with some kind of format without obviously reinventing the wheel, but some kind of, I mean, even the summaries that were given tonight was a good benchmark to kind of help direct what the conversation would be about. Would have been helpful, I think, to direct what to look for, because I kind of started with the email complaints from the reporting party. But since they were like a stream of consciousness email, all one sentence with some caps letters put in there, and maybe if I had this back in notebook time, being the old dinosaur that I am, I really like paper. It might have been a little easier. But looking at this online was kind of challenging. And so this isn't kind of all about, necessarily how the case was finally founded, but obviously the reviewing of the auditor's assistance to us in order for us to do our job. I just mentioned that. And I'm just kind of curious if other people had problems with videos. Mine just kept stalling out. And it wasn't an internet speed, I think, because anything else I did online that day never had any problems. But every time I would go to any of the videos, it would do like about 2 minutes and then it would stall out. And so it was really kind of hard to do. Once I figured out everything that was going on in this case, yes, it made sense. I understood, why the person complained and why it was founded the way it was. So I don't have a complaint with it, but just kind of the convoluted part of the process was a bit challenging for me. But maybe it was just me too. That's all.
I had to go back a bunch of times. I'm sorry. I had to go back a bunch of times to get videos to run. So there definitely was a video issue for sure.
I did not see any of the materials, so I don't have any comments.
I also don't have any comments or questions.
I think I agree. It is harder for me definitely to go through this information online than it is in paper. So I would agree with that. That being said, I think I got it. And I didn't have any problem with the videos, so I don't know what was going on there. But the thing that I wanted to talk about is I agree that this incident being closed was the proper way to go. And I also want to sing the praises of body worn cameras, because that is a big part of why it was able to close it so clearly, I think, especially when you get to the part about how reporting party was treated by the officer. In that part of the complaint, you could see that it wasn't as degrading or insulting as they explained it to be. And I agree with Clay that the racial component is something that I want to keep looking at, and I appreciate that coming up and being investigated. And in this case, it's hard to say, but it didn't seem like it was racially motivated, but I think that is something that we need to continue to take seriously. So that is all of us talking about this case.
All right, I will try to share again before I ask for Lindsay's help. Let's see if I can do this again. Yes, now I have it here. So weird. I think this will work. All right. So case 2. Okay, so case 2 was an allegation of rape, And so the summary of the facts. So Lane County Sheriff's Office, Sergeant A contacted Eugene Police Department, Lieutenant B. And Sergeant A told Lieutenant B when the reporting person was admitted to Lane County Jail, the RP said that he or she had been raped by a Eugene PD officer, and the Eugene officer was the individual that transported the RP to the jail. So this was classified as an incident review and investigated by Internal Affairs. So Internal Affairs Sergeant D responded to the jail and interviewed the RP. So the reporting person claimed during the interview with the sergeant that Officer C made inappropriate contact with the RP, sexually inappropriate touching with the RP when the RP was handcuffed. And in the interview, the RP did not make an allegation of rape during the interview. So Sergeant D conducted a review of the incident video along with the interview and stated that the footage did not show inappropriate contact between Officer C and RP, and the Internal Affairs investigation determined that the RP's complaint was unfounded. And then here are the materials that were provided for y'all to review. And then I'll stop sharing to discuss. And go ahead and talk about this one.
All right, I think it's me. First off, just when I see this and I remember the history in Eugene and, missing that allegation made openly in court by someone, that it's just so critical that it's investigated by, in this case, it was an Internal Affairs sergeant. It would have been disturbing had it been, to me, a line supervisor, not someone from IA. And then echoing what Carolyn said, the video, it makes it very useful and kind of easy to not have a problem with the way this was resolved. Just my comment is the critical important, you just can never ignore it, given the history with this department has experienced. That can never be ignored and has to be investigated. That's all. Thank you.
This one was certainly easier to track. There wasn't the volume of confusing things. I did read the complainant's allegations first, and certainly it was one of those ones that it seemed a bit far-fetched in some ways, just the way it was described and the inconsistencies in the allegations that they put forth. But having the video certainly made it quite easy for us to be able to review, and for IA to look at it and say it didn't happen as it was alleged. And so I agree with the final determination, and that I think it's good that we have these, this easy way to look at these allegations and make a determination as to if it needs to continue down a path of investigation, or that we can dismiss it as they did in this case as unfounded. Thank you.
I did not review these, but I did have a question for either Rob or Lindsay. When was the decision made to classify this as an incident review rather than allegation of criminal misconduct? If it was before anybody looked at the video, then I would think that in order to be safe, it might be a good idea to have it classified as a criminal misconduct allegation. If it was after the video was seen, then I don't have any problem with it, but I'm just curious as to whether the process doesn't allow for that thing to be picked up, like Mr. Lehman said.
When the allegations are serious, then the review is much more thorough. I can't speak to when exactly when Leah watched it, what order and everything, but in cases like this, when she reviews the material when it's a serious allegation before it's classified.
Well, it would seem to me that this is a pretty serious allegation.
Right. I can't speak for exactly when she watched what, but I'm certain that she did watch it before this was classified.
I don't have any questions or comments.
Again, body cam footage. I think that the body cams, I think there's some public confusion about body cams. And I think the people who benefit from body cams more often than not are the officers. That's my opinion. I feel like it protects them and it is able to answer these questions in a way that clears things up. Actually, I would say that it's just as helpful to them as it is to the public. I'm not going to go out anyway. I think it's super helpful to the public too. I agree with this, and I appreciate your questions, Rick. And I'm trying to look at like the time. It happened on the 12th. There was a letter on the 22nd. The employee was interviewed on the 30th. So I don't know if that actually clears anything up. Doesn't really see when Leah got involved.
The other thing I'd say about incident reviews, Rick, that are different than other types of classifications, inquiries and incident reviews can be reclassed. So at the moment, it would be appropriate. I can't speak to which order Leah watched or classified it in, but at the point when something sort of might substantiate either an allegation of misconduct or an allegation of criminal conduct, it can be immediately reclassified to the appropriate level. In this case, it was closed out in incident review because there wasn't any evidence that it needed to be reclassed, but that is different than other types of classification. So for example, if you start with the allegation of misconduct, it can either be substantiated or not, but it's going to stay classed as an allegation of misconduct. Whereas with incident review, it can be reclassed. So I don't know if that's helpful at all, but for whatever it's worth.
Well, I'm comfortable with the choices normally made by the auditor's office. I just was concerned from the standpoint of the public's feeling about it, and we need to make sure that they're satisfied that we're doing the right thing there. But I personally have not a problem with it, but I just wanted to clarify.
I guess in the thing that I want to say about all this is that like the fact that it's on camera and it's very clear on camera that the allegation is false, that definitely helps. And I think the incident that Alan was talking about earlier, definitely it was long enough ago that I don't think there were cameras. So I assume that if there weren't camera footage, that this would have been more thoroughly investigated with the amount or the high stakes allegation that was made. So again, I'm glad for the cameras.
I might be able to kind of answer the question you guys have. Because of the seriousness of the allegation in this, from what I remember, it went directly to our watch commander at the time from the jail as soon as they got the information. The watch commander immediately reached out to internal affairs, and we sent an internal affairs sergeant out there immediately to take the interview and basically do the investigation right there. And then all that information was typed up into our blue team, and Leah was pretty much presented with everything when she got her very first look at it. So most of the investigation was done right then and there, probably within just a few hours of the allegation coming forward.
Thank you. That's helpful. I don't have any comments to add. I echo what's been said before. Cameras are helpful. The investigations seem to have gone fine.
Number 3, right? That's everybody.
Yep, here we go. Look at that. Like I know what I'm doing now. All right. Case 3 was an allegation for improper seizure of currency. Oh, maybe I cursed it. Okay. So the summary of the facts. So the reporting person complained that Eugene PD officers busted down his or her door and drug and raped him or her, and then arrested him or her. The reporting person said that $20,000 in US currency was seized from their residence and not returned. So this was classified as incident review and was investigated by Internal Affairs Sergeant A. And Sergeant A's investigation included review of body worn video, in-car video, police reports, CAD, and RP interviews. So a little background on the investigation. The RP, in a little less than a 6-hour period, called 911 approximately 150 times, and the calls were determined to be not legit. So EPD officers attempted to provide help to the RP who was in distress, and they were unsuccessful in their communications. So based on the misuse of the 911 service, EPD Officer B obtained a search warrant for the RP's residence, and the EPD officers executed that warrant. The RP was arrested and was lodged in the Lane County Jail. During the search of the residence, $15,804 in US currency was located. The currency wasn't seized. It was lodged in the Lane County Jail as the RP's property for safekeeping. The officer didn't want anyone to be able to get into the residence and take the money, so lodged it in for property to make at the jail with as the RP's property to make sure that they got it back. So Sergeant A's investigation confirmed that RP's funds were lodged as their property, and when RP bailed out of jail, a check for $12,804, it was $3,000 of the funds were used for bail, was given to the RP. So the internal affairs investigation determined that the complaint was unfounded. And then there are the materials that were provided to y'all, and I will stop sharing so you guys can discuss. All right.
So this one I liked because we had the reporting party on the complaint phone call into the auditor's office, and Vicky's patience and determination to get at least enough information to understand what was going on was helpful to keep the reporting party on track as they were trying to tell us what was going on, because it went in a lot of tangents. And so that was the first thing I read. It was before I read the part that reporting party had made 150 phone calls to the 911, the call center. But having that intake audio was helpful to understand the state of mind of the reporting party, to understand the direction as to where the case was going, as to what because there were, anyone that listened to it will know that there were a lot of allegations made in there. I mean, it wasn't just about the money. It was about being drugged. It was about being raped. And I always thought cyanide kind of killed you pretty quickly. So when it was cyanide poisoning, I was a little confused by that. But it helped to put everything in perspective and make it understandable as to what was happening and what they were going to be investigating. And so again, having body worn cameras, having the money counted by 2 people and lodged into evidence, or not into evidence, but into their locker. All of those things helped with the tracing of everything that was going on. And then as an IA officer said to me when I first got on this years ago, that his comments to police officers was, if you always do the job right and you always document everything you do, it will make it much easier for an investigation into inappropriate conduct to be able to make sure that you actually did the right thing and to show everybody that you did the right thing. And I think this was a perfect example of that the officer did all of the steps and took care of things the way that they should. The fact that they took the things out of the reporting party's house for safekeeping made sense, given that the door didn't look like it could be secured. So I appreciated all of the information here. I especially appreciated the intake interview on audio, so we could really understand what was going on from the beginning. Thanks.
Hold on a second, Rick. You know what I realized is maybe we should leave Rick and Monique to the end so you can respond after everyone who's seen it has spoken, because that makes more sense than like next round you would go first. So we'll just go through our little 4 and then give you guys a chance. So I thought this was an interesting one because there are so many allegations, but one of them sort of turned out to be true, right? With the money, even though it wasn't completely true in the fact that it wasn't seized and it was mostly returned or at least accounted for. So I thought that was an interesting thing to note. And then I had a question, maybe Sergeant Peckles, you can help, or Cindy, after a warrant is executed in this manner where like the door is broken and you can't just close the door. I do appreciate that they took the money for safekeeping, but it kind of brings up the question of the rest of the stuff. Like if something happened in my house and my door is broken down, I would hope that there would be some effort taken to secure my premises generally. So I don't know, is that a common thing? Do they? What?
Yeah, absolutely. In this case, it was an apartment. So if I remember correctly, they actually got a hold of the apartment maintenance person who came and assisted with trying to get that door secured to the best of their ability. There's some other companies, well, I want to say is it Ellers or something similar to that occasionally will call out to contract on certain things if we need to help with securing a building or something that we've either forced entry, had a warrant, something similar on. So absolutely, yes. Before they left, I'm confident they did something to secure that door to the best of their ability. But I mean, outside of completely chaining it shut or putting a board on it, we can't guarantee how well it was actually, closed back up. Not only that, but then you see a damaged door, sometimes kind of like the broken window effect. Someone walking by who wants to cause some mischief is going to see that as an easier way to get in.
Sure. Okay. So generally it would be secured, and this was just kind of the extra step that the officers took to secure this kind of abnormally large amount of money.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Again, body cam, it really helped paint the picture in an accurate and clear way. So I'm probably going to say that every case tonight. Just be ready for it.
Yeah, I think all of that evidence, as both Bernadette and Carolyn were mentioning, really helps to paint a picture. And as Alan was saying early on, having access to all of that gives us a very full account of what was happening, and that made it very clear that this seemed to be a reasonable situation to how this all turned out, and including a commendation for one of the officers who took the extra steps to save that money, right? So that's all I have to say.
Well, I would say that initially EPD showed a lot of patience, which I appreciate for a reporting party, that they were clearly in distress. I mean, mentally something, it's not normal to call 911 150 times. And also when the officers are banging on the door, the reporting party is telling them they are not going to answer. So there was a lot of patience, and then the warrant was gotten. And I'm not here to guess tactics or anything, but and you have to make an entry and you have to bring in the heavily armored people. I'm for that. I was disturbed a little bit by the dog in the hallway behind this gaggle of heavily armed officers that are going to make this entry. That was really making a lot. It seemed to me that a distressed individual inside an apartment hearing come out, and there's this, it was clearly the sound of an animal that was ready to take someone on, and the officer controlling the animal was actually having to pick it up at one point, I believe I saw on the video. And so I'm just pointing out, I think that was it aggravated. It wasn't a de-escalation, even though at that point you're making forced entry. But I don't think that any of those officers believed that they were going to be met with violence, but of course they don't know. And I totally appreciate that. And that's why the entry was made the way it was. And I'm not quarreling with that. My last point is that it does make a difference to a person to go into jail with cash and come out with a check, because there's no guarantee that the person has a bank account. There's no, it's just, so if it's taken for safekeeping and then converted into something different, I just am a little bit troubled by that, but that's it. But I totally agree. The entry was proper. The complaint was unfounded, that it was investigated properly. The video was very informative, but that's what, these are my takeaways from watching that all unfold.
Now we'll jump to Rick and Monique.
No comment.
So it's been clear that there's a mental health issue here. One question I have is, and again, I'm limited to just the summary that we had today, but whether or not there was outreach from mental health providers at all.
So I can kind of give a background as to why there probably was not mental health up until the point of release from the jail. So up until the point that where we would have been involved in this, is that Cahoots wouldn't go out with the officers on a warrant, on serving a warrant. So Cahoots is the main vehicle or tool that the officers use when there's mental health issues. And so I think if there probably was a lot more going on with regards to all the 911 calls as to whether or not but that was before we got involved. So our little snapshot doesn't give everything, but I think it could have been, without looking at all those other ones, whether Cahoots was involved in that part before we got involved, but they certainly wouldn't have been involved in anything that we did. And then released from the jail, it depends on what kind of release, what might have been on the release agreement as to whether or not they were directed to some mental health services or not. But you'll hear a lot more about Cahoots in later cases.
And if I may, just to inform you that before there was a warrant, and that was the patients I was talking about, the officers at the door actually said to the reporting party, hey, we're not even going to take you to jail. We want to get you help. We are offering you mental health. We might ask that you go see a doctor or something. So that it was officers making that outreach. But in their defense, that was what I was trying to praise them for, was that they spent a lot of time trying to coax the reporting party out before they got a warrant. So thank you, Monique. I didn't mean to step on your,
All right, I think that's everybody for this case.
All right, let me go back and share screen again. Okay, so we're on to case 4, use of force. So summary of the facts. Lane County Sheriff's Office Sergeant A contacted Eugene PD Internal Affairs Sergeant B, and Sergeant A told Sergeant B when they were admitted to the jail, they had been injured by Eugene PD Officer C during the RP's arrest. So this was classified as an incident review and investigated by Internal Affairs. So Sergeant B and Sergeant D responded to the jail and interviewed the RP. The RP claimed that Officer C pulled him from his or her vehicle and threw him or her into the ground and claimed the arrest caused damage to his side or shoulder. So Sergeant B reviewed the incident video reports in addition to the interview and stated that the RP was driving a stolen vehicle and was traffic stopped by Officer C. Sergeant B said that the RP resisted arrest, and Officer C removed him from the vehicle. And Sergeant B stated that Officer C's actions were normal and didn't qualify as a reportable use of force. So the internal affairs investigation determined that Officer C's actions were within policy. And then there is a review of the materials that was provided to you all, and I will stop sharing so you can discuss. Okay.
I have to apologize. This one isn't familiar to me. I think that I might have missed this one. So I don't have any comment on this one. Sorry about that.
I don't have, my comments on all these cases are kind of the same, that the evidence was helpful to review, and I agree with most of the outcomes. So for this one, I was worried that there was the only word that's coming to mind is gaslighting, but I was worried that there was a minimization, I guess, of potential of injury because things weren't observed necessarily, like in the videos when the investigation was done, when this person was taken to the ground. But when I looked at all of everything that was available to us, I agreed with the outcomes, and I think that it's hard to know when someone says they're in pain, whether or not they're, they are in pain, why, where it comes from. And so it's sometimes a hard thing to judge when you're looking from the outside and don't know all the level of force used, even if it's something you can see but not feel. So I would say it was a little harder to sort of come to that conclusion for me, but in the end I did. That it seemed all appropriate.
I think the possibility always exists that someone doesn't know that they're the subject of a felony stop, like the U-Haul, if there was an ambiguity in the contract, or, and in this case, what was really telling to me, the most notable thing was the complaining party, the switching from hearing commands in both Spanish and English, and then answering in English, in Spanish, and then answering in English. Convinced me that the takedown, which appeared to be kind of forceful, but if you're making a felony stop and someone's not showing you their hands and clearly is understanding that they're being asked to do that in 2 languages, it was, it's a little surprising that that's not force classified as use of force, but it's not using any agent of, it's not using any of their tools. And it just got pulled out hard and fast, and a very quick decision. I'm sorry, the reporting party got pulled out of the car very fast, and the decision by the officer had to be made quickly. And so I saw really nothing wrong with the conduct of the police in this case.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but Rob, was this complaint made by the person that was injured, or was this a result of the sheriff's office contacting them about a potential injury?
It came, so this is the second one tonight, same kind of thing where at booking, they make the complaint to the Lane County SO, and then the Lane County SO reaches out to EPD. So really the complaint's coming from the Lane County to us through Lane County, but the person is making the complaint to the sheriff's deputy at the jail.
Right. Okay.
So I guess a little bit of both, really.
Right. My reason for asking is what I appreciate is that IA still gets involved when this comes in through the course from the jail, when the jail lets Eugene Police Department know that there's an allegation, that it still gets written up, even though the complaining party might not make the contact with the auditor's office, or make any more formal complaint other than I got hurt, when I got taken down, that it still gets reported back to EPD. So I appreciate that part of the process. And then going forward, I think part of that is all because of the blue team system that came into place. I mean, it's been around for, pretty much all the time that I think most all of us have been on the board. But I remember when there was a time where they didn't have that system. And Cindy could probably talk to it better than I can as to when that came into place. But I just appreciate the way that this came into the system and was thoroughly reviewed. And I agree with everything else. Thanks.
I think we've had Blue Team since 2013, so it has been a while now.
Rick or Monique, do you have anything to add or ask?
No comment.
I don't have anything to add either. Thank you.
I thought I saw you shake your head, but I wasn't sure. Again, sorry about that. I don't know how I missed that one. I apologize at my negligence. Final case, is that right, Rob? Just one more?
Actually, we have 6. So there was 4 incident reviews and then 2 service complaints. So got a couple more. And let me do this again.
See how many more I missed.
It's all good. Okay, number 5. So constitutional right, unlawful search. So summary of the facts, the RP complained that his or her civil rights were violated and alleged that Officer A conducted an unlawful search of their residence's bedroom without permission. So this was classified as a service complaint and investigated by field supervisor. And so for the background, Officer A responded to the RP's residence, and Officer A was requested and was granted permission to enter the residence. And the RP had a child who was present at their residence in violation of restraining order. So there was a little bit of confusion because the Officer A couldn't determine or couldn't find the restraint, determined that the restraining order wasn't on file. So the RP said that they had a copy of the restraining order and went inside their bedroom to search for a copy of it. Officer A followed the RP to the bedroom, and while I was walking through the residence, they used their flashlight to illuminate the room. So the RP asked Officer A to step outside of the residence, and Officer A complied. And then, of course, the restraining order discrepancy was removed, and the child was resolved, and the child was removed. So Sergeant B conducted a review of the incident video and spoke with Officer A. And Sergeant B's investigations determined that the footage did not show an unlawful search or a civil rights violation. And so Sergeant B concluded that the RP's complaint was unfounded and Officer A's actions were within policy. So let me, here are the materials that were provided for y'all, and I will stop sharing so you can discuss it.
Am I going first? Did you go first? Okay. Yeah, I thought there were 2 interesting things about this related to the other cases. One is the sort of confusion that everybody has because of a problem with paperwork and how that unfolds in real time, and how it can lead officers down a path that, you know, may not be where they meant to go when they find out the full scope of information. So, you know, there's not, in the U-Haul case, there's not a lot to be done except for, except that, you know, outside parties may not have all of their information readily available, excuse me. But in this case, there was obviously some glitch, and I think the name was recorded incorrectly on the restraining order, and that's why there was a failure to know that that existed and that was effective. So just an interesting correlation between the two, and it was good to see police officers handle those situations pretty well in the face of confusion. The other thing is the change in behavior that community members and people who are stopped by police may have from one second to the next, you know, inviting someone into their home, and then also very soon thereafter wanting them to not be there at all, and then filing a complaint that they, you know, because of some, you know, incident that triggered them in some way, feeling like it was a violation of their rights. And so there's volatile situations where, our community members have a lot going on and a lot of mental health issues and also just family dispute issues that police officers are entering into whenever they enter someone's home. So it's good to see the kind of behavior that the police officers have shown in these cases. As far as the incident itself, I don't think it was, I agree with how it was classified, and I think the officer handled the situation fine.
Hey, it's a family dispute. It's a domestic, I suppose, a restraining order violation, and the officer's inside an unfamiliar house, and I don't have any issue with how they're trained, and if there's some looking around and not just standing there waiting for this individual to produce this alleged restraining order that isn't in the system. My question is just for Rob, and that is, so this is a service complaint, and I just want confidence and along Rick's line for the public to know that the auditor's office looked at this before it's completely, even though it was investigated and disposed of in quotes by apparently a staff supervisor, a line supervisor, that it's evaluated by the auditor.
Sure, this one I can speak to firsthand, because when this one came in the next day, we were in the office watching the video before it was classified, the three of us. So Lindsay and I have taken a little bit of time to get up to speed with a new job. So the other one, I just can't say to the order, but like Sergeant Peckle said, the information's there before it's classified. But this one, yeah, we reviewed right away.
Yeah, so I guess it's an ignorant question, but it's an important one, that the EPD on its own doesn't get to classify a service complaint. These classifications, all of them are getting filtered through the auditor's office.
Yes, and I could be wrong, and Lindsay could correct me, but I think that the old way there used to be some overlap with classifications, but now only Leah can do it. Only our office can do it. I think the old way, or actually Cindy's on here, she could say too. But yeah, only the auditor's office classifies.
Thank you.
I can speak to that. In the very early stages, when we first got civilian oversight in the police auditor, there was a period of time where the chief of police could reclassify a case, but there were some concerns about that, and that was changed. And so now the auditor's office has the exclusive ability to classify cases.
I don't have anything to add to this discussion on this one.
I have something. I just wonder whether you put the officer in a strange house, like Alan said. The person says, I want to go into my bedroom and get the restraining order for you, or whatever it is, or show you that it's not right or something. The person could be going in there to get a shotgun for anybody's. I mean, I don't see any problem with the guy going in there with a flashlight and making sure that he's not going to be attacked.
And I don't think you have that.
Secondly, I don't see any constitutional right in that situation. He's on the premises legally, and no one told him he couldn't go in there. So I really question whether this thing should have even gotten this far, but I'm glad it got wiped out before it.
And since I don't think you got to see the paperwork, that's exactly what the field supervisor review stated, what you just said.
The thing, I had a couple thoughts, and that's speaking to one of them, Rick. I think since the reporting party isn't being under investigation at this point, I don't see why the officer can't at least kind of narrate what they're doing, or say, hey, I'm going to follow you in here, just, to make sure that this situation stays unescalated. So I think that would be, if we were having an actual discussion about this case, I would suggest that as training or policy of just kind of talking through why you're doing that. I think that if the officer had been more transparent, then that probably would have been a little bit different. And then also, I wanted to clarify just for like the public record, when Rob was telling the case, you changed it from son, daughter to child, but I want to make it clear that this is an adult child, like a 30-ish person. So just for the record. And then I think we've heard from Rick. Monique, do you have any?
I just wanted to say that I do agree with Rick. I don't see a constitutional rights issue here. And I guess I ultimately agree with the decision that was made, or the finding that was made.
Now we're ready for the last one, right, Rob?
Home stretch. Number 6, service compliant. Performance. All right. Let me try this again. This one's not working. Give me 1 second. All right, here we go. Nothing's easy. All right. Summary of facts. So the RP, reporting person, complained Officer A improperly handled a traffic incident after RP had an altercation with the driver of a second vehicle. We'll call second vehicle driver B. So this was classified as a service complaint and investigated by a field supervisor. So the supervisor of Officer A. So the RP said that Officer A should have pursued criminal charges against driver B. And this all stemmed from the RP. He felt like the RP was on a motorcycle. He felt like driver B in an automobile was following too closely and created a danger to the RP. So the RP stopped their motorcycle in a lane of traffic, didn't pull over to the shoulder, but stopped in a lane of traffic and then walked to driver B's vehicle and confronted driver B. Driver B produced a shovel and in kind threatened the RP. So the RP told Officer A that they wanted to press charges against driver B for the threat of physical injury. And Officer A explained to the RP that parking in a lane of traffic to confront driver B was poor form, poor manner to handle the incident. And Officer A told RB that they were both at fault. They were disorderly and could be cited. And then Officer A explained to driver B and RP the proper techniques to handle dispute with other vehicle operators. And then the Officer A didn't cite RP or driver B, and they went on their own way. So Sergeant C investigated the incident and determined that Officer A's actions for handling the incident were appropriate. So Sergeant C spoke to the RP and explained the findings. And then there are the materials that were included for y'all, and I will stop sharing so you guys can discuss it.
If it's me, I got no patience for road ragers, and it was handled totally appropriately, and that's my comment. It worked, and I have no quarrel with the review or the conclusion. Thank you.
This is one of those cases that I always wonder why an officer chooses to go to which car first. Because I wonder if it would have been different had the motorcycle person been talked to, who was the seemingly the complainant of the behavior that led to the officer going there. And if that story had been heard first, and then went to the car, the person driving the car, if this might have been viewed differently. I doubt it, because officers are good about listening to both sides before making any judgments. I found the demeanor of the motorcycle driver completely understandable. And the demeanor of the vehicle driver, understandable for somebody who seems to have been doing something they shouldn't have been doing. I did not think the person operating the vehicle seemed like they were scared by the person getting off their motorcycle and coming to talk to them. And I found it, but many of these things I'm saying don't really have anything to do, I guess, completely with the disposition of the case. But since we get to talk about what we see in policing, what I found interesting, comparing it to the last case where they're following somebody into the bedroom to make sure that they're safe, that they're not going in there to get a shotgun, as Rick says, or a knife or something like that. But in this particular case, the entire time the officer was talking to the younger driver, I wouldn't call him a kid, their hands were in their hoodie, in the pocket of their hoodie the entire time. And I kept wanting to scream, take your hands out of your hoodie, because for officer safety, they're not supposed to have their hands, at least from 95% of the cases we've reviewed. They tell them to keep their hands where they could see them, especially since the driver had already pulled out a shovel, kind of weird looking weapon sort of thing. So I kind of was, I don't want to say I was dissatisfied with this case. There were things about it that I was kind of a little frustrated with. But what I did appreciate that at the end, which the officer taking the time to really try and explain to the motorcycle driver, how it would have been better to handle it another way. And clearly the motorcycle driver really didn't want to hear it at that moment in time. We can only hope that at some point in time, they understand that, yes, pulling over, letting the person who's riding your tail just go on by is certainly the safer approach, even if it might not be the appreciated approach at the time, because you don't want to let somebody pass. But what I thought was really interesting and why I appreciate the cameras staying on the entire time was, as the officer let the motorcycle driver go, I believe the last comment before the camera went off and was muted was, next time, just try to not be a jackwagon. So not something we normally hear, might have been a concern had it been heard by a member of the public, because I know in some other cases that we've had officers making comments to people that it's kind of one of those comments that might not be taken well. And I think if the motorcycle driver had heard this, probably would not have been taken well. But it pretty much sums up what each of these people that were operating vehicles that day should have been doing. It's like, try and be an adult, be a safe driver, and don't be a jackwag. So anyway, that's all I have to say.
I don't think that I have any way to follow that. I agree about the outcome of this case, and that it didn't need to be risen further.
Similarly, I don't have anything to add, but agree with what's been said.
No comment.
I have no comments or questions as well.
All right. Auditor report.
All right, let me see if I can successfully share my screen and we'll pull it up. So Leah was nice and completed an auditor's report for July. And I'm not going to read it, but she talks about just what's going on in the office. And there's talk about the number of complaints and different things that we've reviewed. She said some really nice things about her staff. We appreciate that. And she talked about how great the annual report is. Lindsay did a great job on that. And then she talked about us moving, just kind of what's going on. There's nothing that you all don't know. And if you'd like to read this in its entirety, it will be up on the website. So I will turn off the stop share and happy to answer any questions, comments, or concerns.
Want to make sure to get that Beatrice piece in on this.
Yep, she is. Yep, she's on it.
Thank you, everyone. Sorry, I was trying to find my buttons here. I just wanted to, in the interest of time, I'll be very brief, but we have an event coming up that I've secured a booth for. It's the Asian celebration. It's happening Saturday, July 30th at Alton Baker Park. We're sort of getting back into the groove of things, like Lindsay said, with events actually taking place. And right now, summer is filling up pretty fast with a lot of things happening over the weekend. So this is one of the first opportunities we'll get to get back out there and talk directly with the community and let them know what the auditor's office and the civilian review board do. I've extended the invitation also to members of the police commission, as well as staff from the Office of Equity and Community Outreach, which is formerly the Human Rights Office. And I also, of course, wanted to share with CRB members in case anybody was available and volunteering for a couple hours of your time to man the booth that we will be having. The event runs from 10 to 8, so it's a pretty long event. So I'm thinking of splitting it up into like 2 to 3 hour sections or shifts, and possibly capping it at like 2 people per shift so that we can still have adequate spacing or distancing in our booth, because as we know, cases are going up again. So we want to be mindful of that. It is an outdoor event though, so that's helpful. So I can send an email out with this information to all of you. And if anybody's interested, if you can only go for 1 hour, that's fine. If you can sign up for a shift, that'd be great. If not, I will probably be there the entire day, most of the day. And like I said, we'll have other people from other boards and commissions also joining us. So it would be great to meet some of you in person. I think almost, I would say half the board I haven't actually met in person. So that would be awesome to finally get to meet you guys. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. You can just email the auditor's office email, or I can shoot you my email as well. So thank you for letting me have the floor for a little bit and for joining us tonight.
It's the first time we've seen you. We only see
I
the
know,
picture.
I'm sorry. I have 2 kids that are like, so I'd rather be behind the scenes, but I am here always watching. So
Nice to see you for the first time. Thank
you.
That's really great. I'm really glad that events are going again. That's good.
Yes.
Good job. Good for you to get on that. Is there anything else from the auditor's office before we move on to our closing comments? All right, closing comments then. We typically don't meet in August because city council is on break during that time. So that's in our schedule to not meet in August. I think Bernadette expressed maybe desire to not meet in September instead, or in addition at our meeting. So we talked about how we would bring that up tonight. So do we want to, I guess, keep it how it is and not meet in August, but then resume on September 13th? If that's good with people. Okay, I don't hear any discussion, so I think that we will just keep it as it is. So our next meeting will be September 13th. That is my closing comment, but we can go around the room as it were. Oh, I'm hoping in September we will be actually in a room and maybe even in a new office. Is that possible? Lindsay and Rob are like, you don't know.
Government moves are slow, so anything's possible, but
We're also, so 2 things, we're continuing to try to figure out a space where we could do in-person or hybrid meetings. Those types of spaces are extremely limited within the city right now. To do a public meeting in that hybrid format. So that's challenging, but we can continue to ask and try to figure out if there's a way that we could have access to that space. Once we do have our own office, we have control. We are hoping to have a meeting space where we have more control over those types of things. But September feels ambitious for some reason. Maybe I'm just feeling a little pessimistic. But we can hope. And I guess that's something it would be really helpful to have everyone's feedback on, about sort of the desire to go back to in-person meetings and that type of thing. Because I don't know that we've had a group discussion about that, or at least I haven't witnessed it. So thank you for bringing that up.
Well, I will say that I'm interested in in-person meetings. I got to meet Clay in real life for the first time this week, and that was really exciting. So it'd be fun to actually meet the rest of you. So in terms of onboarding for the new members, I think that happens after we get the background check done. But Monique, I think you can expect that we'll meet probably you and me and Leah and perhaps other people from the office, and we'll kind of, you've witnessed this, so you might have a lot of questions, and we will be able to kind of explain more about the history and process of the board. And then Rick, we'll probably give you the option for onboarding, but you can always turn that down since you know what you're doing. So that's my comment. We will move on to Clay.
My only closing comment is that it's nice to have new members. Thanks, Rick and Monique, for stepping up and joining the board. And I look forward to future discussions starting in September.
Likewise, welcome to Monique. Welcome back, Rick. Beatrice, it was nice to see you in person for the first time, or not, at least on the Zoom instead of that picture that we see all the time. And thank you, Cindy and Sergeant Peckles, for your participation in our meeting. And if we don't see you next month, we'll see you all in September. Oh, that's a song.
Clay, I like the wind chimes. It's kind of, I was trying to figure out what it was. I kept hearing it every time you were talking. And now I was like, oh, it was wind chimes. And Monique, I saw your dog walking in the back with a tail sticking straight up. I was like, oh, a dog. I like that too. So I'll miss that from Zoom, but that's about the only thing I'll miss from Zoom. I would much prefer to us be in person. I think we talked about September taking off because school's gearing up. But you know, if we have a meeting in September, I will just deal with it. I think, Monique, you might want to just go back and don't watch the entire thing. Just watch part of one of our old meetings where we actually do a case discussion, because it's completely different than what happened tonight. And there's kind of an order to it. And I think it might be helpful just to kind of see what the case review looks like, and then what it is we're supposed to actually talk about. Then when they onboard you, some of that will make a lot more sense. Lindsay and Carolyn, thank you for going to council and presenting both the auditor's report and the CRB annual report. Since you didn't come back, or at least maybe I missed it, that they didn't seem to have any questions, comments, or concerns about what we're doing. Yay, us, we're doing a great job, and we'll just kind of keep doing that into the new year. Rick, glad to have you back. That's it.
I'm glad to be back. It's good to see you all, and I'm very encouraged by the discussion tonight. I thought everybody had nice things to say, and it should be a good group to work with.
So again, I am really excited to be here and to work with you all. I look forward to the onboarding process, and I look forward to getting to talk with you a little bit more, Carolyn. And I look forward to seeing you all in September. I think that is about it.
All right, just a couple more things. Bernadette, do you have a case in mind where we sound really smart that you want to suggest that Monique goes back and watches? If not, you know.
That would require me to actually have some memory of any of the cases that we have done in the last year. I'm sure if I actually looked back at something, I might be able to kind of go, oh yeah, that was a good one to discuss. I don't think last month's was, but I'm just kidding. I think anyone where we were discussing a case, you know, I think it's helpful, but you just look at the minutes, you'll find something. I'm sure, Carolyn, if you can remember something better than me, then you can let her know.
Okay. That was kind of just a joke, but that's fine. Again, everyone, I do want to echo one thing that the city council did say. They did have a lot of questions, and Leah and Lindsay did a great job answering those questions, but they did definitely express profound gratitude to the board for doing what we do. So I do want to pass that on. They do acknowledge that it's a big job and that as volunteers, they appreciate that. So one thing that I think I'll point out is I always talk about how I wish we had more public attendees or people viewing the meetings. And one of the counselors said that the fact that we do such a thorough job makes it so the public doesn't have to engage. I don't know that I agree with that, but that was a perspective that was shared. So I think that is interesting to share. So we will meet in September on the 13th somewhere, somehow. And welcome to our new and returning member. And thank you to all of you who participated tonight. So
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you all. I'm going to stop recording now.
Thanks.